I've never liked mirrored elevators. They show you what you look like when you're trying not to react. The message came in just before noon. A quiet chime, the kind that usually signals a logistics update or a boarding pass. But it wasn't from my team. It was from my mother. A single sentence, no punctuation, no greeting. If you're coming to the awards this year, please use the side entrance. This is a formal event. The screen stayed lit longer than it needed to. I didn't answer. The gold ring on my right hand pressed faintly into my skin as I scrolled through the family trust documents. The name section next to my profile was blank. I refreshed it twice. No error. Just gone. There had been no meeting, no conversation, no warning. I opened the live metrics dashboard. Ethan's face filled the press section headlines, calling him the future of American hospitality, praising a digital concierge program I wrote 3 years ago, the one they called impractical and detached from tradition. He hadn't changed a line. Jack's face appeared in the corner of my screen. His tone was calm but not casual. They sold 10% of Henderson Holdings to a third-party fund this morning. I checked your name wasn't consulted. Looks like a liquidity play. My reflection in the glass shifted as I leaned back. Behind me, the skyline glinted, Los Angeles spread out like a game board I no longer wanted to win. I adjusted the collar of my navy blouse, the one my mother once called too severe for family functions. A small file sat in my inbox, award night, seating plan, peak Eve. I opened it. Ethan front center. My name wasn't there. Not omitted, not overlooked. Removed. At the bottom of the message chain, a second note from my mother had arrived. Try to look polished. This isn't one of your casual consulting events. No, we're proud of you. No, glad you're coming. Just a reminder that presence wasn't welcome. It was tolerated if properly accessorized. I minimized everything and stared at the desktop for a long moment. The cursor blinked, like it was waiting for permission. I didn't give it any. There's a silence that doesn't need volume to be cruel. It's the kind that enters a room first, clears a chair that was once yours, and leaves the door open just wide enough to pretend you were invited. I looked at the message again, and didn't delete it. That was the last time I read anything from her without closing my hands. I used to believe that effort could earn space. The audit reports were spread across the dining table that year. My father had left them unfinished, a bottle of scotch, half uncorked beside his chair. I stayed up reworking every line item until the math finally respected the truth. He never asked how the penalties disappeared. The folder was gone the next morning, along with the credits. At Ethan's first conference as keynote, the slides looked familiar. Font layout phrasing, I had written them in a hotel room outside Seattle, cross-checking the projections until sunrise. He nodded through each one as if they had come from nowhere. No name on the final slide. No mention. I clapped anyway. Later that winter, my mother set out a gingerbread cake with names etched in gold script. For the stars in this family, she said. One tag read Ethan, the other Rebecca. I traced the edge of the platter before offering to pour the wine. My chair was the one closest to the sink. I'd booked the Aspen trip the year before. Flights, lodge, ski passes, each lined up in a color-coded itinerary, printed and wrapped with a ribbon. The morning of the flight, she pulled me aside near the car. Try not to overdo it this time, Brianna. It's unbecoming. There's a tone parents reserve for children who embarrass them in subtle ways. No shouting. Just the scrape of a knife on ceramic. Jack once asked why I didn't walk away then. That should have been enough, he said. not unkindly. I didn't answer right away, just watched the steam rise from a chipped mug on my desk, the same one I used during grad school. Eventually I said I thought if I waited long enough, they'd see me. Waiting became a rhythm. Helping became a habit. When no seat was offered, I stood quietly near the edges refilling glasses, folding napkins, collecting the stray compliments never addressed to me. "Don't act like a guest in your own home," my father once muttered as I reached for my coat after dessert. But the seat had never been mine. I smiled, nodded, picked up the empty plates. Even now, I remember the weight of the dish towel more clearly than the taste of the food. There's a certain silence that comes from trying too hard for too long. It doesn't echo. It just stays. Recognition doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it skips your name altogether. My diploma came in a red leather case heavier than expected. I remember the way the gold seal caught the light when I lifted it on stage, no one in the front row to wave back at. The only message I received that week was a text. "You know, hospitality isn't a degree, it's a feeling. Don't overthink it." The words stayed longer than the celebration. The first international deal I closed for the firm took 8 months of negotiation and a 4-day flight loop through Dubai, London, and back. I presented the results over lunch, detailing revenue streams and long-term strategy. My father leaned back in his chair, stirred his tea, and murmured, "I still don't know how you manage these things. You've never even run a front desk." That comment outlived the contract. When the company printed the New Year's cards, the layout was precise, metallic ink, heavyweight paper, embossed names. Ethan's name was bold-centered, paired with a quote about legacy. Mine was at the bottom. Smaller, italicized, with thanks to internal operations support. I kept the card, not on a wall or in a drawer, but inside the spine of an old book on negotiation theory. It curled at the edges from humidity. The foil wore off after a few seasons. Jack saw me reading it once, or maybe just staring. He didn't speak for a while, then, still hoping they'll get it right someday. I didn't answer him, just closed the book, gently aligning the spine with the others. Later, I said I don't want them to remember. I want to forget waiting for that. There are certain erasures that don't come with ceremony, not loud enough to call betrayal, just soft omissions, an empty chair, a name left off a gift, signed only by obligation. At the bottom of one family photo framed above the fireplace, my name is scrawled in faded marker. Someone wrote it in after the print was made. It tilts slightly left like it was added in a hurry. I never asked who wrote it. Some acknowledgements arrive too late to matter. Others never come at all. I've learned the difference, but I still keep the card. Not out of nostalgia or hope. Some things are worth holding on to not because they mean something, but because they once tried to, and that, in the end, was enough to leave it where it was. There's a particular stillness that follows something permanent. The revised trust document arrived by courier-thin envelope, no note. I scanned through it once. My name wasn't missing. It had been replaced. The space I used to occupy had been rewritten with care. New font, clean lines, like I had never been there to begin with. No one called. No explanation came. At the awards dinner, the tablecloths were a little too crisp. Centerpieces arranged with artificial precision. I stayed near the edge where the lighting softened and the noise faded. Ethan stood at the podium, posture practiced. His voice carried the language I once drafted in a cramped apartment over a bowl of cold rice. Word for word. Our vision, he said, must blend heritage with forward-thinking personalization. I didn't need to finish the line in my head. I had written it. A photographer passed in front of me without pausing. Helen raised her glass to the crowd and smiled with polished restraint. Ethan's gift, she told a guest nearby, is knowing how to lead. Brianna's always been more comfortable in background support. Consultancy work. Smaller scale. Across the room, Robert offered a brief nod to a reporter. He's the only one of us who understands what this brand means. He carries your grandfather's instinct. I didn't blink, just reached for a water glass with my left hand, the one that still bore a tiny scar from a paper cut made during that first rejected proposal. Jack slipped me a small folder beneath his napkin. 3 pages, internal rollout strategy, identical to the blueprint I'd buried 3 years ago. Their signatures were fresh. The title page carried Ethan's name alone. Someone touched my elbow lightly. I turned. A former classmate I hadn't seen since Cornell. "Why aren't you up there?" he asked, gesturing toward the stage. "You built half of this, didn't you?" I looked at the folds in the table linen. They were ironed without creases, but not without effort. "I used to think there'd be a moment," I said. "A time when someone would invite me up." "I don't think that anymore." He didn't respond. The room applauded again. Someone mentioned Ethan's leadership as if it were invention, not inheritance. I folded the folder once then again, pressed it flat beneath my plate. It's strange what silence becomes when you stop expecting it to end. Not an absence, just a room you finally recognize has no chair for you. And maybe never did. Some exits don't echo. They just stop being doors. I signed out of the shared calendar first. The system asked if I was sure. I unchecked the notify others box. There was nothing left to notify. The internal family network came next: group threads, financial boards, donor access. Each login had a name attached to it once. Mine disappeared with a single confirmation click. There was no goodbye note, no carefully drafted statement. Just one message to my mother: "I won't be coming." "Don't worry." The screen stayed lit for a few seconds too long. Jack looked at me across the table. "There's a story here," he said, fingers resting on the tablet, eyes searching mine. They made it public. We could respond. I reached for the ceramic cup beside me. It had a tiny chip near the handle, barely noticeable unless you held it wrong. I didn't. The press moved on within 2 cycles. Ethan's picture replaced mine in industry spotlights. No one called for a quote. No one needed to. A week later, I transferred what remained of my personal stake in the family fund. A thin slice, carved out silently, redirected to an education grant under the name of someone no longer employed. Tina Walsh, tuition room and board full. No one noticed the line item. Sullivan Global's headquarters left the financial district 3 days after that. The movers came early. No banners, no ribbon cutting. Just clean walls, silent exits, fresh air. I signed the lease for the new space with a different pen, one I had never lent to anyone else. My name was no longer listed on any of their legal documents, not as consultant, not as next of kin, just a blank field in places people forget to check. That night, I sat by the window in my own apartment. No skyline speeches, no closing ceremony, just lights blinking across the city like signals meant for someone else. I opened my inbox. There were 32 unread messages tagged family. I didn't open them. I didn't forward them. I archived the entire folder, clicked twice, and typed a name I hadn't used in years. Cole. The system prompted, "Are you sure you want to disconnect this account?" I clicked yes. It didn't ask again. No sound, no fade out, just the quiet certainty of something fully, finally shut. Not because it slammed, because I closed it and didn't look back. Solitude doesn't announce itself, it just stops asking for permission. I moved into the penthouse without telling anyone. No assistants, no staff, no welcome basket. The doorman looked surprised, but didn't question the keycard. It had been mine for years, though the door had never opened for me until now. The floors creaked in places I hadn't expected. I walked without turning on the lights, letting the shapes of the room introduce themselves in the dark. There was no schedule to meet, no voice calling from the next room. I boiled water on the stove and watched it rise. The kettle was steel with a dent near the handle from a shipment I once refused to return. I never liked pristine things. They feel untested. There was a folder left unopened on the counter, blue ink bleeding faintly through the manila. I read it slowly, then again out loud. I heard the shape of my own voice echo back unchallenged. Music came in short moments, not playlists, just static radio stations that drifted between piano and silence. I didn't skip anything. I didn't need to. Once I reached for the switch near the bathroom and stopped midway. The room was already bright from the window. I left the light off. Jack sent a single-line email. "Are you all right?" I answered without hesitation. I've never been this quiet, but I've never seen things this clearly. The desk by the window had nothing on it until that Thursday. I took out a sheet of paper and drew a circle. Not a chart, not a plan, just space. I labeled the center BC and didn't abbreviate the rest. The air in the apartment moved on its own, vents humming without anyone adjusting them. I didn't change the settings. I let the temperature decide. The phone rang once unknown number. I watched the screen fade and didn't touch it. In the evenings, I folded the same sweater over the back of the couch. I wore it only inside. The sleeves were stretched, the fabric thinning near the elbows. It smelled like time, not perfume, not the past, just the clean nothing of being unnoticed. No one knocked. No one reminded me where I was supposed to be. And for the first time in years, I didn't need to be reminded. There is a freedom that arrives not from escape, but from no longer expecting return. It doesn't come with a name. And maybe that's what makes it real. Absence has a way of making people rearrange their sentences. The voicemail started after the third week. Same tone, different phrasing. We should talk soon. Family matters. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. I didn't reply. I only listened once. Ethan's message arrived next. Formal subject line, bullet points a link to a calendar invite. We're updating the brand strategy. Your perspective would add value. You're still part of this even if you're not on site. I ran my thumb over the edge of the phone. The screen dimmed before I could finish reading. Jack sent a short report the following morning. Ratings were dropping. 2 Henderson properties flagged for service inconsistency. An anonymous tip, his words not mine, had made it to the industry review board. The tone of his summary was clear, even when the sentences weren't. A contract from a European partner followed language redacted, but the line stood out. Pending re-evaluation of affiliation. Prefer to engage with Sullivan Global going forward. That afternoon, a reservation confirmation slipped into my inbox. Name spelled right. Time stamped. The restaurant was the same one I once walked past without being let in. Helen had picked the table. Private corner, full view. She arrived in a navy suit, pearls that caught the light without apology. I waited. We've always been stronger when we stood together. This has gone too far. She began, folding her napkin with practiced ease. You've made your point. Now, come back. For the family. For our reputation. I stirred the water in my glass, watching the slice of lemon float sideways. There's no need for bitterness, she added softer this time. You built something impressive, but none of us can do this alone. I didn't correct her. She placed her hand on the table fingers still manicured in the color she used for holidays. I know we've said things, but let's put that aside. Reunite. Realign. It's time. I looked at the ring she wore my grandmother's. She used to say it only belonged to the one who stayed. I set my fork down quietly. I'm not sure who you're hoping will return, I said. But whoever she is, she doesn't sit here anymore. Her hand didn't move. The check came. Neither of us touched it for a while. Some invitations aren't made of paper. They're transactions disguised as grace. And some returns aren't refusals. Just the knowledge that nothing real is waiting where you left it. Some names lose their weight when you stop answering to them. The Casio watch on my wrist clicks quietly, a half-second behind real time. The straps cracked, and the plastics fogged from years of draw light and draw dark. I wear it now not for style or nostalgia, but because it asks nothing of me. The class meets twice a month in a borrowed lecture room with flickering lights and chairs that creak too easily. They don't know who I am. Not really. I show up with black coffee, an old laptop, and a stack of notes printed on recycled paper. No bio. No introduction. Who funds this? Someone asked once. I smiled without answering. I don't think they would. Jack looked at me over lunch last week. His expression carried the question before it landed. You know you could take it back. The titles. It wouldn't take much. I tapped the side of my mug, the one with a chipped rim and no logo. I finally have something I never had before, I said. The right to do nothing loud. He nodded, but didn't respond. At the quarterly meeting, I walked in without a filter between me and the table. No proxy, no avatar. My name appeared beside my face on the screen. Some stared longer than they needed to. Others looked down. I spoke about systems, how they fail quietly before they collapse loudly. About how silence is often the first alarm. I saw Ethan in the back row. His collar was pressed, his pen capped. He didn't write anything down. Afterward, I passed the mirror in the hallway and didn't stop. The boardroom didn't feel like a reclaiming, more like a revisiting, brief and unclaimed, a place I could leave again without consequence. I walked home without checking my phone. There's a kind of strength that doesn't want to be proved, that doesn't flare or flash, but holds steady like a pilot, light, small, quiet, impossible to put out. No one addressed me as Whitlow during the meeting. The name tag just read, B. Cole. No one questioned it. No one needed to. I used to think dignity came from recognition. Now I know it survives better in the space where no one claps and you still speak anyway. Closure doesn't always need an audience. I wrote it slowly, not because the words were difficult, but because the silence around them felt heavier than ink. No edits, no rewrites, just one page folded once down the middle. The pen I used still had his initials on the clip. A graduation gift. Never quite fit in my hand. There were no apologies in the letter. No timeline, no blame. Only one sentence that took longer to write than the rest. I am still grateful to have once been your daughter. But I no longer need to be recognized as such to continue. The paper creased cleanly. I placed it in an envelope unsigned, unstamped, and slid it into the bottom drawer of a desk I no longer used for planning. That morning, I visited the bank, not the one with family accounts, but the quiet one off 7th. No marble lobby, no concierge at the door. I signed over the remainder of the trust funds tied to the Whitlow name. The account officer didn't ask questions. I left the memo line blank. A scholarship was created within the hour. Anonymous. For young women of color entering hospitality leadership. Renewable. Full coverage, no essays required. I listed no contact information. Later, I opened the legal documents I'd put off for too long. The form asked, "Do you wish to change your name?" I typed it Brianna Cole and didn't flinch. The screen updated quietly. No fanfare. Just a new line on a form followed by a soft beep as the system confirmed what I already knew. Jack's message came minutes later, new name, same clarity. I didn't reply. The name change wasn't a statement. It wasn't revenge or even liberation. It was a quiet act of sorting what I chose to carry forward, what I chose to lay down. No press release. No dinner to commemorate. Just a soft click as I locked the file away alongside the Parker pen and the letter no one would read. Names don't build you. They tether you until you learn to walk without their weight. Some people erase names with rage. I let mine fade gently, like ink left too long in the sun. No burn marks, no sound, just the stillness of something no longer mine. And that, I think, is enough. Peace doesn't arrive with ceremony. It settles like dust on the edge of a windowsill you no longer feel the need to wipe. I woke up without sound. No alerts, no reminders, no flights to confirm. Just the stretch of quiet against my shoulder and the soft line of light that settled across the floor. I didn't check the time. The kettle steamed slowly on the stove. The clay teapot had a tiny crack near the base, sealed with gold resin by a student who called it a sign of use. The mint leaves were curled in a paper pouch, folded twice. I chose them over the espresso tin that hadn't been opened in months. My apartment smelled faintly of citrus, and pages, no candles, no guests expected. The shelves leaned with books I hadn't alphabetized, and a chipped blue mug held pens I didn't plan to use today. Nothing matched. Nothing needed to. Outside the window, an older man in a windbreaker shifted through Tai Chi postures. A little girl chalked stars onto the pavement behind him, adding a sun in the corner, just big enough to cover a crack in the sidewalk. They didn't look up. I didn't expect them to. The envelope on the table was still sealed. The handwriting was familiar, a little thinner than I remembered. Brianna Whitlow centered underlined. I'd moved it twice to dust the table once, to make space for a plant I wasn't sure would survive the winter. I hadn't opened it. I didn't plan to. The jazz station played something old and soft. I didn't catch the name. I didn't need to. The melody filled the space the way steam fills a room, not loud, just there. I poured the tea into a small ceramic cup with no handle and took the notebook from the shelf. Its spine hadn't been cracked yet. The paper inside was slightly textured, the kind that resists smooth pens. No outlines, no quarterly goals, no initials in the corner. Just one line written slowly, as if saying it aloud would have made it less true. I'm still here. Not to prove anything, just to be. I closed the cover without bookmarking the page. There was nothing I needed to return to, and nothing I needed to escape.